Finally tonight, Isaac Julien paints a loving portrait of groundbreaking artist and filmmaker Derek Jarman in his film, Derek. In the Life spoke with Isaac Julien and MoMA's chief film curator, Raj Roy, about Jarman's seminal body of work.
But the film got conceived really through the producer Colin McCabe, who had done this amazing interview of Derek in 1990, and he had kept that interview. And I think after a decade had gone past, he turned around and said to me, "We really have to make a film." And I said, "You've got to be joking. You know, how can you make a film out of just a day interview?" We started collaborating with Tilda Swinton a couple of years before we actually shot the film, because I was really very, very enamoured with her Letter to an Angel, which was published in The Guardian, a sort of homage to Derek's work. We wanted to, in a way, kind of rememorialise Derek for a new generation.
I remember the sea. I remember the garden. I remember the cottage. But most of all, I remember you, dear Derek.
Most people these days would categorize Derek Jarman as a filmmaker first, and in many ways you could call him a queer filmmaker, an avant-garde filmmaker. I prefer to think of him as an artist who worked in film.
I wish I could take all my works with me.
There's a very existential part to Derek making films. They're part of his life. They're not just films. Art and life are intertwined, really, in the films that Derek makes. And I think because of the political statements he was making through those films, the very act of making them became very important in terms of a cultural repositioning of what was being, in a way, repressed at that particular moment in time.
If you're talking about, say, Jubilee, the film he made in 1977, timed with the Queen's 25th anniversary, it really embraced the punk movement and the kind of chaos that that movement was engendering and celebrating, and incorporated it into a filmic vision. So in many ways, the whole process, the chaotic process of making a film, became a signature style. And the end result was ultimately embraced, although at the time he was not uniformly embraced even on the punk scene. He was still seen as an outsider, mostly because he had queer content.
Of course, Derek was an incredible painter. He was also an incredible writer. You know, he was a Renaissance man, and I think there's a way in which he was a one-off, but certainly I think all of those set inquiries are very important to even my own work.
In many ways, Isaac's story parallels Derek's in that he pioneered not only a new way of working, but a new way of telling a story that was completely authentic to his experience.
I mean, I participated in quite a lot of those activities through all the sort of interventions I made in the gay community, you know, and so, you know, I was involved in Outrage, which was a sort of version of sort of ACT UP a Queer Nation in England. So, I mean, in a way, I think there is a certain autobiographical aspect in that work for me as well. But it's just deployed differently.
At a time when some were calling for the setting up of ostracized HIV island communities, and others feared not only for their lives, but, believe it or not, also for their jobs, their insurance policies, their friendships, their civil rights. Your defiant gesture of public confession was made with such particular and characteristically inclusive generosity that it was at that point that you made an impact that far outspanned the influence of your work.
Where it was very, very difficult, so it was a very brave thing to do what he did.
5 years ago, I publicised that I was HIV positive and in the press, and not knowing really where this would lead.
When Derek expressed that he was publicly HIV positive, I think his work became more serious. Films like The Last of England are really quite pertinent in terms of having a particular serious tone to them.
The Last of England actually picks up the sort of sheer anger that was in Jubilee. Does it in a different way. Rather than looking down the barrel of a rifle or something, you tend to be in a straightforward attack.
kind of cross-queer embrace of the struggle was very much part of his work and informed the way that he moved his work forward, ultimately arriving at Blue, which is the most transcendent work of cinema probably in the last 20 years.
I caught myself looking at shoes in a shop window. I thought of going in and buying a pair, but stopped myself. The shoes I'm wearing at the moment should be sufficient to walk me out of life.
It's his perspective on life, but certainly also on dying. There's metaphor in terms of the color blue. It's what he could see at that point because of the degenerative nature of his disease.
At this stage, you know, I mean, I hope I'm not ill for a long time, but it's not a worry. I have to say I've completely come to terms with all of this because it's sort of like, well, there's nothing else to do, is there? So the thing is to smile through it.
And I think only through channeling his experience of knowing his death was coming, but being part of a struggle to fight to make sure that those lives counted, that is what makes Derek's work transcend time, really, in the end.